Just to be clear, you said yes, only adults should take puberty blockers?
I think we should protect children, let them make adult decisions when they become adults.
So that means
you support age restrictions?
you are against puberty blockers for kids under the age of 18. Is that
Yes.
unclear?
What Mr. Poilievre and Ms. Smith are proposing is to take away the rights of parents and their kids to make the right choices for them with their doctors. We don't think government should be doing that.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre this morning facing multiple questions from reporters on his way into caucus, weighing in on Alberta's sweeping policy proposals for gender health care and education. While the Prime Minister, as you heard, slams his stance, Poilievre argues Trudeau is highlighting the issue to create divisions and distract from his economic record. Should we expect provincial politics on these kinds of social policies to remain a political football on Parliament Hill? Let's bring back the front bench. Elliott Hughes, Gary Marr, Kathleen Monk, and Joël Denis Bellavance. Elliott, I'll start with you and just put that question to you. Do you think that it's fair to expect that kind of thing to continue?
Well, I certainly do if Pierre Poilievre continues to sort of put his foot in his mouth. And I think the Prime Minister should actually consider inviting Premier Smith to Ottawa more often. Because every time she comes, it seems to put Mr. Poilievre in a little bit of a tough position, and you can kind of see him squirming there in the press conference. Look, I mean, this is an issue that, for some reason, Mr. Poilievre decided that he wanted to comment on, and continuing to talk about it, continuing the story, and providing the Prime Minister and the government with sort of more ammo, so to speak. And the thing is, he knows this is problematic. I mean, he told his own caucus that they shouldn't go out and say anything about it, knowing that it might lead to members of his caucus saying things and stupid things, if I might say, about it. And then he goes out and is pushed into having to comment it about himself. What that then allows for is, one, it takes him off a core message about the economy, bread and butter issues that have been working super well for him. Every time he seems to talk about something else other than the economy, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's gender identity politics, it doesn't really go well for him. And I don't understand quite why he hasn't learned his lesson. The final thing that it does is it provides the Prime Minister with more proof that you can link, Premier Smith, Pierre Poilievre, Tucker Carlson, MAGA conservatives, and it no longer becomes a stretch. It becomes actually a very simple equation for people to understand. And that is not something that I think most Canadians want to see. It's not the kind of politics they want to see in Canada. And I think what it does is it gives the Prime Minister something to actually start fighting with, which I think the government hasn't had in a very long time.
Gary, do you think that's the case?
Well, I think it is a very difficult political policy to work on. Let me just go back to my time as Minister of Health. We did about 30 gender reassignment surgeries a year. So it wasn't very frequent, and we didn't do any as it related to children. This policy that the Premier's put out is saying we don't want to have gender reassignment surgeries for those 17 and under. I think that in talking to 3 individuals that I know earlier today, they are 3 people that have gone through gender reassignment, but they did so as adults, and they would say that they weren't ready to make that kind of decision until they were of the age of majority. And even when they do go through the gender reassignment surgery, the idea that all your problems are solved is it's not true. There are still challenges that they face, but they are happier having made the decisions that they made. I think what Premier Smith is talking about is ensuring that children don't have the capacity to make that decision. And earlier today, there was a protest at Ernest Manning High School. One student who spoke up was actually quite thoughtful. And he said, we're going through the process of trying to discover who we are. And we shouldn't be restricted from the information as we go through this process of self-discovery. I think that's an eminently sensible perspective to have. I think it's one that many parents share. Not all parents are great, but overwhelmingly, parents care deeply and love and support their children. And so to be able to support them emotionally, which is, and with policy, as Premier Smith has talked about, I think is a a sensible and reasonable perspective to have. We want parents to be engaged in the responsible decisions that are made for their children, and so to support them while they are minors, so that they might make decisions that, in some cases, will be irrevocably not reversible. Holding off those decisions until they're adults is what the policy is all about.
I have, sorry to move on, I just have limited time left in the segment, and I want to make sure everybody is heard from. Kathleen, I think what Gary said, certainly there are a lot of people in this country who are worried about parental rights, and this issue is speaking to that for them. There are also a lot of people who feel like that kind of a policy will negatively impact them, and that they don't really have the voice that they could on the national stage because they are a minority of the population. The question I sort of started with was, to what degree do you expect it to continue to dominate discussion and debate here on Parliament Hill?
Right. Let's be really clear that for almost a year, not quite, but almost a year, it has been Conservatives that have been driving this issue onto the political agenda. So first it started with Blaine Higgs in New Brunswick last spring, and then it moved to Saskatchewan with Premier Moe in June of 2023, and then it moved to Premier Smith in January of 2024. It has been Conservatives across the country who have been driving this issue. At the last federal Conservative convention in Quebec in September, they passed a motion very much similar along the same lines that Ms. Smith has put forward. In fact, really, Mr. Poilievre today went further than Mrs. Smith by saying that he would like to see a block to puberty blockers, no puberty blockers whatsoever to children under 18. I got to ask the question. I don't know why Conservatives are so obsessed with children's genitals. And I really want to ask that question because it baffles me, because the Canadian Pediatric Society has said, back out of it. Politicians shouldn't be involved. This is a choice between doctors and their patients and their families. You know what the Conservatives could be concerned about? They could be concerned about our foster care system. That it needs help, and we could be finding homes for children who need to live and grow in a safe home. They could be looking at children who are hungry, who need a school nutrition program. They could be doing all sorts of things for kids across this country, and yet they refuse to do this. They continue to bring up these divisive issues. So that's the question that needs to be asked.
I got 1 minute left, JD, and the last word goes to you.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the Quebec experience. In Quebec, François Legault, who's seen as a conservative premier, put that issue to a committee of 3 wise persons who will come up with recommendations. And the objective was to take this away from the political arena. And so no political parties would try to gain some political gains out of it. So that was the issue in Quebec. But it could be, I think, for Mr. Poilievre, it could be a sensitive issue within his own caucus. I point to 2 persons. Melissa Lensman, she's openly gay. She's the deputy leader. And also Eric Duncan, who occupies a position of leadership in that party. And every time the Conservative Party touches social issues and don't focus on the economic issues, they lose within their ranks, but also among progressive voters.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the degree to which they were trying to say, you know, Mr. Poilievre was saying, oh, okay, this is my view on this, but that Justin Trudeau is talking about it to detract from other issues around the economy. So we'll have to pay attention to that. Thanks so much to everyone. Elliot Hughes, Gary Meyer, Kathleen Mung, and Joël Denis Bellevon.